Anyone who has travelled into the centre of Sydney has more than likely used the network of railway lines that run under its streets. In the modern day, the City Circle and Eastern Suburbs Line form core parts of the city's transport network. The oldest sections of this network were built in the early 20th century under the Bradfield scheme. This was a plan to revolutionise the railways throughout Sydney through the electrification of the suburban network, the construction of a new bridge across the harbour, and the construction of underground stations within the city itself. However, while the City Circle, electrification, and bridge were built, much of the original plan was left unfinished. In John Bradfield's 1912, 1916, and 1924 reports, he outlined the full scope of this project. The core section would consist of 5 stations in a balloon loop configuration, consisting of Town Hall, Wynyard Square, later renamed to Wynyard, Circular Quay, St James, and Liverpool Street, later renamed to Museum. From this core, there would have been multiple branches, the first of which was the Western Suburbs connection, which should have branched off between Wynyard and Circular Quay, and then across Darling Harbour, either on a bridge or through a tunnel. From there, it would service 2 new stations called Balmain and Darling Street, before turning south towards a new station called Western Road. Following Western Road, there would have been a flyover junction for a new line travelling west towards Ryde. This line would have called at new stations built at Drummoyne, Five Dock, Gladesville, Tennyson, and Rydeville. Depending on the report, this line either connected directly to the existing Ryde station, or to a wide junction that avoided the station altogether. Back at Western Road, the line would have continued south to new stations at Rozelle, Leichhardt, and Annandale, before connecting to the local tracks of the main suburban line between Petersham and Stanmore. The next major line branched off at Wynyard and travelled north across the Sydney Harbour Bridge. It would have then called at 2 new stations, the first named Kirribilli, later renamed to Milsons Point, and the second named North Sydney, before connecting to the existing North Shore line. At North Sydney, a junction was to be constructed that would allow trains to travel north to connect 2 new lines, one travelling north, then east to connect to the lower North Shore, with new stations at Falcon Street, Neutral Bay, Cranbourne, Mossman, Balmoral, Clifton, and Athol. The second branch would have travelled north to the northern beaches, with trains stopping at Amherst Street, Northbridge, Sailors Bay Road, and Seaforth, before the line split in 2, with one branch travelling east to Manly, while the other travelling north to Narrabeen, before terminating at Pittwater. The third major branch was towards the eastern suburbs. In the earlier plans, this line branched off after Circular Quay, but in the final plans it branched off after St James. This new line would have called at King's Cross, Glenmore Road, Paddington, Edgecliff, and Bondi, where the line would then split in 2. The northern branch would then travel to Watson's Bay, while the southern branch would travel south via Waverley, Little Coogee, and Daceyville, where the line would then again split in 2. From here, one line would travel south to La Perouse, while the other would continue west through Rosebery and Waterloo before connecting to the Illawarra line just south of Erskineville. In total, this project would have comprised of 54 new stations and would have dramatically increased the size of Sydney's suburban railway network. What was built? Unfortunately, the Great Depression, Second World War, and post-war car-centric planning meant this plan was never fully realised. In 1926, the first part of the City Circle opened, with Liverpool Street, now Museum, and St James. This was followed in 1932 by Town Hall and Wynyard, which opened alongside the Sydney Harbour Bridge, with Kirribilli, now Milsons Point, and North Sydney Station on the North Shore side. After this, there was no further work until Circular Quay opened in 1956, which finally completed the City Circle, albeit to a different design. Since then, the only other line in the original proposal has been the Eastern Suburbs Line, which opened in 1979, although this line follows a different route and only travels as far as Bondi Junction. What remains today? While it's unfortunate this proposal never came to life, there are still some indications of it around Sydney. The most famous is at St James. St James has an extremely wide island platform, because that's where the Eastern Suburbs Line tracks would have been. However, since the original Eastern Suburbs Line never happened, there was no need to use them, so the tracks are never put in place. However, several metres of tunnels were dug out in preparation for this future line, but they also remain abandoned. The other major remnant are the abandoned tunnels at North Sydney Station, which would have served the northern beaches and lower North Shore line. However, since this line also never came to fruition, the tunnels have sat abandoned since. As for the western connection, to my knowledge, no tunnels were actually built for this project. However, I have not been able to verify this, and it was considered the same priority as the Eastern Suburbs Line. So, it is likely that some pilot tunnels were built. If they were, they would have branched off the City Circle tracks between Wynyard and Circular Quay, and they would be visible as an empty tunnel veering to the left when travelling from Wynyard, and rejoining from the left when travelling from Circular Quay. In conclusion, while this proposal was impressive, it more than likely would have never happened. Even without the Great Depression, World War II, and post-war car-centric planning, this network would have been overkill for a city that had a population of 1.7 million in 1950. However, this plan is the embodiment of how planning should be done. This was a project for the future. The planners of the 1920s knew that Sydney would grow, and they knew that this infrastructure wouldn't be needed for a very long time, but they still planned for it. When Sydney grew in population after the war, its rail network was able to keep up, and the network's core allowed the extremities of the network to be expanded. Without the parts of this project that were completed, the Sydney we know today wouldn't exist. And by extension, it's impressive to imagine what modern Sydney would have looked like if it was completed in full.